I'm back, better than ever, and today I want to talk about Spy Kids. So, in honor of Spy Kids, today I tried to sort of emulate Carmen from the first movie, with some tie-dye and some braids. So, Spy Kids. There are 4 movies. 3 of them I grew up watching, and then the 4th one I actually hadn't seen until recently when I decided to make this video. Because that came out in, I believe, 2011, and at that point I wasn't really, into it anymore. But what a wild ride. So I think today, I honestly still have not decided, but I think today I'm going to be ranking the series. I think I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. So today I'm going to rank the Spy Kids movies and give you my opinions, because that is honestly the whole point of these videos. In last place, we have Spy Kids 4D Spy All the Time, right? That's what it's called. That is not what it's called. It's called Spy Kids 4D All the Time in the World. I have my notes over here on my laptop because I did research. This movie came out in 2011. It did not have the same success that the other movies did. Let's leave it at that. Jessica Alba is in this, and to that I say why? I don't really know. Overall, this movie is just not good. I put off watching it for a few days after I watched the first 3 because I watched the trailer and it just looked kind of bad. I think the movie is already at a disadvantage because the main characters are different from the past 3. The first 3, the main characters are Junie and Carmen. You could argue that Junie is more of the main character, especially in the 3rd one, and I feel like he has the most growth over the whole series. But I feel like this movie's already at a disadvantage because the 2 characters that everyone's really attached to are not in it. They show up a little bit here and there, but they don't have a very big role in this. And honestly, the best parts of the movie are the parts that the actors who play Carmen and Junie are in. There's this one moment where Carmen, as an adult, is showing the new 2 main characters around the old Spy Kids unit in the OSS. That was one of the best parts of the movie. You don't want the best part of your movie to be reminiscing on the older, better movies. In this movie, there's a lot of fart jokes. Unnecessary. They're not even funny. I'd let it slide if they were funny, but they're really not. Most of this is because there's a baby, and the baby farts a ton, and it's just not funny. I'm sorry, it's not. Farts can be funny, but it was not done well in this movie. Another thing that they rely on way too much is the talking dog. So the 2 kids, Rebecca and Cecil, they are sort of thrust into this Spy Kids world. And it's very similar to Carmen and Junie from the first movie. They're completely unaware about spies and the spy world, so they're unprepared. They don't know how to navigate. It's all very new. Which in the first movie was really fun because you get to see them interacting as siblings and trying to navigate this new, their new life basically. But in this movie, they have a talking dog. And the dog is a robot spy dog thing that Jessica Alba, their stepmom, has put in charge of the kids. I think I wouldn't mind it so much if the dog was literally a guard dog that had been trained to sort of protect them and maybe lead them to certain things. But having the dog talk really just takes away from the chances of Rebecca and Cecil figuring things out. They only are able to go so far because the dog can talk. Whereas with Carmen and Junie, it was more impressive and more of an adventure because they were figuring out as they went, as opposed to already having a character be like, you should do this, or we should do that. I would have just preferred it if the dog was silent. It could still be a character, just maybe not talk. I don't know, I just feel like it took away from the development of the two main kid characters, because they weren't the ones figuring things out and like putting the pieces together. They were just like given the answers by the dog. There's also this whole B plot where the dad, played by Joel McHale, who I think is very handsome, he plays the dad, and his whole thing is that he doesn't have enough time for the kids because he's out there making his hit TV show, Spycatcher, which is supposed to be funny because his wife is a spy and he doesn't know it, and it's supposed to be funny. However, I literally do not give a shit about this B plot. It's so unnecessary and honestly boring, and the concept for his show is frankly just stupid and doesn't make any sense. It's called Spycatcher, so he's trying to catch spies. Does he not understand that that could put so many people in danger? It's just a weird concept for a show and not even sustainable. Realistically, how many spies are there in the world? How many spies are there just in his area? And the whole thing about spies is that they're not going to get caught. They're smarter than that. So it's just such a weird idea for a show. I don't get it, and it's honestly it's probably the most boring part of the whole movie. But yeah, this one is in last place. Honestly, probably because of a little bit of bias. That it's not Carmen and Junie who are the main characters. But then there's also everything that I just talked about. The dog character and the weird B plot with the dad's TV show. It's not good. I appreciate the message of time is valuable, but overall this movie just was not it for me. Next, in third place, we have Spy Kids 3D, Game Over. The first three movies came out all pretty much back to back. This one came out in 2003, and this one growing up was my least favorite, but I really wanted to give it a chance. I remember watching this with some people from my neighborhood. We were at this girl's house and we were in her basement, and she had the movie, and she had the 3D glasses that you would wear to watch the movie, because that was the big thing about the movie. It was 3D, and it was in theaters, and it was very immersive, so a lot of the visuals cater to that. But even without the glasses, it translates pretty well, I think. It's not distracting. You can definitely tell oh, this moment in particular was made for the 3D experience. Pretty much immediately in this movie, I am confused, which is not good. Stay with me on this one. At the end of the first movie, we meet the director of the OSS, which is the spy organization that they work for, and it's George Clooney. He's the director. Fine. In the second movie, part of the beginning of the movie is that the director of the OSS has stepped down and they need a new director, someone to replace him. Also in that movie, we meet the President of the United States. And now, in the very beginning of the third movie, George Clooney is back, better than ever, as the President of the United States. So, I guess you could argue that there was an election, but it's 2003, so if you're going based off of the U.S. Election calendar, it wouldn't, it just doesn't add up. I mean, it's just so confusing, because Junie makes a comment to the former director, played by George Clooney, who's well, you stepped away so you could be President of the United States. They kind of lost me on that one. The timeline just doesn't make sense. They really gloss over it. It's also just really funny for me because there's this running theme in the franchise of really big name actors being in the movie. And that's just sort of fun to go back and watch and be like, oh my god, that's George Clooney. Or like, Selma Hayek is in this one. Antonio Banderas, obviously, he's in the first 3. Sylvester Stallone is the villain in this movie. So it's just like, it's just funny, like, to have these huge name actors in a kids movie. Speaking of Sylvester Stallone, he is the villain. He's the toy maker. That's his sort of like villain name. And he's trapped in a video game that he's built. He's programmed it, I think, pretty much. There's all these scenes with him talking to these 3 different versions of himself. One is like the military version of him. The other is like the science version of him. And then the other one is this hippie version of him, and he is probably the best character in this movie. The hippie is just so funny. Like, some of the lines, I was actually laughing out loud. It felt very campy. I just really appreciated that as a character. Just to clarify, if you haven't seen the movie, the whole premise of this one is that Junie needs to go into a video game because Carmen went on a spy mission and she's stuck in the video game, and he needs to like go and save his sister basically and shut down the game. So there's a bunch of levels that they have to compete and like go through to get to the level that Carmen is stuck at. And I think it's the second level of the game. There's this like car race scene. And I think it was then that I realized part of why I don't like this movie as much as the first 2 is because it's literally just watching someone play a video game. Like, it's not really a spy movie at this point. It's just trying to get through the levels. You know, Junie doesn't even really use any of his spy gear. It's all, like, very limited to what is available within the game. So it's less of a spy movie and more of a video game movie, and I think that's why I don't like it as much. Also, the, you know, dynamic duo magic of Carmen and Judy is just not there. Eventually, when they reunite, there is, but for so much of the movie, it's just Junie, and I love Junie. I think he's a really great character, but, you know, the duo magic is, I keep saying duo magic like that's a thing, but it's just not the same, and I think that's also part of why I don't like it as much. Also, Elijah Wood is in this for like 3 minutes, so there's that. The final battle scene, I will say, was pretty cool. All of the characters from the first 2 movies come back at the end and like band together and stop the robots. That was fun, but overall, this movie really lags. It's so long, and it's literally just watching someone play a game. I do like what they tried to do with the 3D aspect of the movie. I feel like that was pretty creative, but it's just, it's not a spy movie. It's not a spy movie. There are spies in the movie, but it's not a spy movie. In second place, we have Spy Kids. So this is the first Spy Kids movie. It came out in 2001, and I love this movie. The music is amazing in this movie. It just, something about that opening scene where they're like zooming in on the house and the music is swelling. And then there's a whole thing where the mom tells Carmen the story of the 2 spies who fell in love, which, spoiler alert, is actually a story of Carmen's parents being in love and being spies. So this movie is the introduction of Floop. So Floop is played by Alan Cummings. I also love him. He's one of, like, he's just so versatile, I feel like. Very versatile actor. He just wants peace and love, you know? And Mr. Minion is pushing him to do all this evil shit that he doesn't want to do. He just wants to have his kid's TV show, you know? I feel like the exposition in this movie is done really well. We have a really good understanding of who Carmen and Junie are. Very quickly, we understand the dynamics within the family really well, very quickly, which is really important because the family aspect of the movie is so central to the plot. So I feel like they did a really good job of like building that in the beginning. I always wanted to live in the Cortez house, and I wanted to go to the safe house that they go to. Also, the mom, a baddie. She is a baddie. Carla Gugino plays the mom, and she is just such a badass. I love, like, everything she wears. She just looks incredible in, and I would like to be her. Part of my big issue with the fourth movie was the whole thing of, like, Rebecca and Cecil, the two main characters, not really figuring things out by themselves because they had the dog robot thing telling them everything. But with Carmen and Judy, they're, like, thrust into this situation, and, you know, because already they have sort of, like, a rocky relationship with each other as siblings, it just makes it all the more interesting to watch them try and figure out how to be spies and how to save their parents. And there's, like, a real sense of adventure with that, too. Floop is just an absolute icon. I love Floop. Probably one of my favorite characters in the whole series. Just a delight, and Alan Cummings is great. So Carmen and Junie are traveling around trying to figure out how to rescue their parents who have been kidnapped. And they go to their uncle. Well, they don't know it's their uncle at first, but this guy, Machete, ends up being their uncle. Carmen, especially, is trying to convince this guy, Machete, to basically help them out and, like, help rescue their parents. And Machete's like, no, we had a fight, and I will never help my brother ever again. Carmen at one point is like, but we're family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Like, you're brothers. And Machete says this line. It was so good I wrote it down. He goes, Cain and Abel were brothers. Look how they ended up. It's little things like that that are gonna definitely go over little kids' heads. But rewatching it as an adult, I was like, that's good. That's funny. I will say the fight scene, like the big fight scene that we're building up to the whole movie, ends so quickly. It, like, doesn't even really happen. Mom and Dad beat up some bad guys, and then, like, the actual big threat is ended pretty quickly. Overall, I thought that this movie held up pretty well. I feel like all the characters grow a little bit, especially Carmen and Junie, obviously, because they're, like, the main characters. But you see how they start to appreciate each other more, especially Carmen. She's not so mean to him in the end. And it's just a fun movie. And in number 1, if you hadn't guessed it yet, Spy Kids 2, Island of the Lost Dreams. Ooh. So this one came out in 2002, right after the first movie, a year later. The production company that made the Spy Kids movies was called Troublemaker, I believe. It was just called, like, Troublemaker or something. But at the beginning of this movie, they have a Troublemaker theme park, which I just think is really funny. I feel like they were maybe secretly hoping that this movie was gonna, like, do numbers at the box office, and then they could open a Troublemaker theme park, which would end really poorly because the rides there are not safe at all. In this movie, we have Gary and Gertie Giggles. They're two rival Spy Kid spies. This movie is just phenomenal. To quickly summarize, they're at this dinner event, and there's this thing called the transmuter? It's a transmitter thing. And the bad guys come in, and they steal it. And the blame is put on Junie, and then Junie gets fired from the OSS. Carmen thinks it was a setup, so she sort of hacks the system and reappoints Junie to get, like, a key card or whatever, and then steals the assignment of Gary and Gertie Giggles because it's, like, a really big mission, and she's like, if we can do this, we can clear your name, and all will be right. So they travel to this island, and on this island, no electronic devices really work. There's definitely something being said here about the use of technology, and the over-reliance on it, which I think is an interesting take for a kid's movie. When they're on the island, they come across all these like crazy looking animals. There's like spider monkeys, so it's like the lower half is like spider and then the top half is like a gorilla. And there's a pig that can fly, like stuff like that. And we meet Steve Buscemi, who is so good in this movie. So Steve Buscemi's character, Romero, who's the best, he's created all of these animals, but it was by accident. And since then, since this accident, he's just been hiding out in his little cave. And he has probably one of the most iconic lines in movie history. I've seen it reposted like all over Twitter, and every time it makes me laugh because it's so dramatic and intense for a kid's movie. It's so much. So, okay, he says, "Do you think God stays in heaven because he too fears what he's created here on earth?" Iconic. It's really nice to see the growth between Carmen and Judy in this movie. They definitely have a lot more trust between each other, and like they have a really good like back and forth, I think. Floop makes a very brief appearance in this. Again, just an icon. Just an icon. I love Floop. Iconic. This movie is just my favorite out of all of them, I think, because it's a spy movie, but there's also this like island adventure theme going on, and I feel like it's balanced out really well. Unlike the third one, where the focus is way too much put on the like video game and beating the video game. But yeah, I'm glad that I did this because I had wanted to rewatch the movies for a while, and this gave me an excuse to do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Bye.